My name is Eleanor. I'm 62 years old, and what I'm about to tell you today will forever change the way you see your own family. Just 4 days ago, my own son Victor and my daughter-in-law, Sophia, pushed my husband George and me off a 95-foot cliff in the misty hills of Willow Ridge. As I lay there broken, ribs cracked like dry twigs, blood filling my mouth, I heard George's faint whisper, "Eleanor, don't move, play dead." But that wasn't the worst of it. In those final moments, George revealed the darkest secret a mother could ever hear. A truth our children had buried for 27 years. For over 42 years, George and I built what we thought was the perfect family. We lived in a cozy countryside cottage on the edge of Willow Ridge, a quiet village where morning mist curled over the hills like a soft blanket. Every dawn, the smell of freshly brewed tea mixed with the chirping of sparrows outside our window. I taught middle school at Willow Ridge Academy, coming home each afternoon with stories of my students, little Timmy who drew dragons, shy Lila who finally spoke in class. George ran his blacksmith forge behind the house. His rough, calloused hands could turn cold iron into ornate gates, garden sculptures, even a tiny rose pendant he made for me on our 30th anniversary. We had 2 sons, Tomas, our firstborn, 28 when he died, and Victor, 6 years younger, 22 at the time. Thomas was the light of the house, always laughing, helping his dad at the ford, carrying me over puddles when it rained. He dreamed of becoming an architect, sketching blueprints on napkins during Sunday lunch. Victor was different. Quiet, withdrawn. He'd sit at the table, picking at his food, eyes fixed on some distant point. But I loved him just as fiercely. Mothers don't play favorites, I told myself. Every Sunday after church, we gathered around our hand-forged ironwood dining table, George's proudest creation. Thomas talked about university. Victor said nothing, just stared. In the evenings, George and I walked the winding trails around Willow Ridge. We dreamed of grandchildren, retirement, growing old together in that very cottage. I never imagined those peaceful walks were training for the one that would nearly kill us. Weekends were alive with joy. My sisters, Clara and Beatrice, arrived with their husbands and children. The house exploded with laughter. Kids ran wild in the yard. Women swapped pie recipes in the kitchen. Men fixed fences or grilled meat over the fire pit. George was my perfect partner. After 42 years, he still picked wild daisies on his way home from the forge. He'd help me grade papers. I'd hold iron rods steady while he hammered. We were a team, unbreakable. At night, we sat on the veranda watching stars. One day, George would say, "We'll see the ocean. Build a smaller house, watch our grandkids grow." Perfect happiness, I thought. But perfect happiness hides the deepest tragedies. When Thomas turned 21, something shifted. He and Victor began arguing, whispers in hallways, slamming doors, silence when I entered the room. I'd ask. George would say, "Just brother stuff. It'll pass." I wanted to believe him. I needed to. Then came one November night 27 years ago. Thomas didn't come home for dinner. We waited until 11 p.m., then 12, then 1 a.m., then 2 a.m. Victor was in his room, studying. But when I asked about Thomas, his eyes flickered cold, empty, wrong. George went out with neighbors. They searched every trail, every stream, every hangout. At dawn, they found him, Thomas's body at the bottom of Blackthorn Ravine. The police said, accidental fall, slipped in the dark. I never questioned it. How could I? I couldn't imagine the truth was far more horrific. Thomas's funeral was the darkest day of my life. I wore my only navy dress, the same one from my mother's burial. I cried until my eyes swelled shut. Victor stood beside me calm, too calm. His face was blank. Now looking back, that expression sends ice through my veins. George never left my side. He held me when my knees buckled, whispered, "We still have Victor. We'll get through this." His words tasted bitter in my will even then. After Thomas died, Victor changed. He became attentive, loving. He helped with chores, accompanied George to the forge, brought me tea when I cried. I thought, he's grieving. He's trying to fill the void. How naive I was. He was building a perfect mask to hide the monster inside. Time dulled the ache but never erased it. Victor married Sophia, a charming baker from the next village over. They seemed happy. They had 2 beautiful children. I finally felt life was giving us a second chance. Sophia called me Mom and helped with baking when they visited. Victor had inherited his father's talent and started his own blacksmith business. Everything seemed perfect again. But lying at the bottom of that ravine, ribs shattered, blood in my mouth, I understood it was all a carefully constructed lie. The first signs of trouble began 7 months ago when George and I decided to update our will. We had saved our entire lives. Between the cottage, the land I inherited from my parents, and our bank accounts, we had nearly $220,000 to leave our children and grandchildren. It was Victor who suggested we visit the lawyer. Mom, Dad, you're both 62 now. It's important to have everything in order, he said, with that smile that now seems sinister. Sophia nodded beside him, stroking my hand with fingers that would later push me to my death. We love you so much, and we want to make sure you're protected, she added in her sweet voice. How foolish I was to interpret those words as genuine love. The lawyer, Harold, an older man we had known for years, explained the options. We could put everything in a trust, divide the inheritance among Victor's children, or make a traditional will. Victor insisted on naming him and Sophia as sole heirs, saying they would handle fair distribution to the grandchildren. Besides, you're going to need us when you're older. It's better for us to have access to the resources to take care of you properly. Something in his tone made me uneasy, but George seemed convinced. My husband, always more trusting, accepted without much resistance. I had my doubts, especially remembering how Thomas had always talked about helping us financially when we got older. But Thomas was gone, and Victor was our only surviving child. We signed the papers on a Thursday afternoon. Sophia wore a lilac blouse and gave me a big hug afterward. Now we're officially a united family forever, she whispered in my ear. Her words gave me a chill then, though I didn't understand why. Victor shook his father's hand with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. That night, as I made dinner, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had made a terrible mistake. The following weeks were strange. Victor and Sophia started visiting more often, but their visits felt different. They no longer came just to spend time with family. They always had suggestions about home improvements, investments, or life insurance policies. Mom, you should think about selling this big house and moving somewhere smaller, Sophia said while examining our furniture with calculating eyes. We could help you find a comfortable apartment in town, but I loved our cottage. Every corner held a memory. Every room told a story of our 42 years of marriage. The kitchen, where I had prepared thousands of meals. The forge where George created his masterpieces. The yard where our children and grandchildren had played. I couldn't imagine life anywhere else. When I told them this, I saw a flicker of irritation in Victor's eyes that chilled me to the bone. Mom, you're being irrational, he said in a tone he had never used with me before. This house is too big for 2 people your age. If you fall down the stairs or something happens, we won't be able to help you in time. Sophia nodded vigorously, adding, besides, the maintenance must cost a fortune. It would be much smarter to sell now, while the market is high, and move to something more appropriate for your age. George began to consider their arguments. My husband, always practical, started talking about the logic behind their suggestions. But I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more behind all this pressure. One night, after another tense conversation, I asked George if he didn't think it was strange that Victor was suddenly so interested in our financial affairs. "Eleanor, he just cares about us," he replied while brushing his teeth. "Maybe we should consider his suggestions. We're not as young as we used to be." But I saw something in my husband's eyes, a shadow of doubt he didn't want to acknowledge. Now I know that George already had his suspicions. He had started to connect the dots that I didn't even know existed. Things escalated when Victor suggested we give him power of attorney over our finances. "It's just for precaution," he explained while Sophia prepared tea in our kitchen as if she owned the place. "If one of you gets sick or has a health issue, we can manage your affairs without legal complications." The way he said it so naturally, so logically, almost convinced me. But there was something about his insistence that made me nervous. I couldn't sleep that night. I stayed awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to George's breathing beside me, trying to understand why I felt so uneasy. The next day, I decided to call my sister Clara for advice. Clara had always been sharper than me, more suspicious of people's intentions. When I told her about Victor's pressure, she was silent for a long moment. "Eleanor," she finally said, "doesn't it seem strange to you that Victor is so anxious to control your money? I mean, he has his own business. He's doing well financially. Why would he need so much control over your finances?" Her words hit me like a slap. She was right. Victor had never seemed to have financial problems, had never borrowed money, had never shown any signs of needing our help. That afternoon, when Victor came for another of his talks about our future, I decided to confront him directly. "Son," I said as we sat in the living room, "why is it so important for you to have control over our financial affairs? Your father and I are still in our right minds." His reaction was immediate and telling. His face hardened, and for a moment, I saw something in his eyes that reminded me of someone else, something cold, calculating and dangerous. "Mom, it's not about control," he responded in a tense voice. "It's about love, care, and family responsibility." But the way he said family, responsibility sounded more like a threat than an expression of affection. Sophia, who had been silent until then, intervened with her sweet but firm voice. "Eleanor, we just want what's best for you. It's painful to see you worry about things we could easily handle." That night, after they left, George and I had our first serious argument in years. He thought I was being paranoid, that I was looking for problems where there were none. I insisted something wasn't right, that our son's behavior had changed too much. "George," I said as we washed the dishes, "do you remember what Victor was like before Thomas died? He was different, more distant, more... I don't know how to explain it, but there was something about him that scared me." My husband stopped washing the plate in his hands and looked at me intently. In his eyes, I saw something I hadn't seen before recognition. "Eleanor," he said in a very low voice, "there are things about Thomas's death that I never told you." My heart began to pound so hard I thought it would beat out of my chest. George's words hit me like a lightning bolt. "What about Thomas's death?" I asked with a trembling voice. My husband sat heavily in one of the kitchen chairs, the same table where we had shared thousands of family meals, where Thomas used to do his homework, and where Victor had always remained silent. George ran his hands over his face as if he were trying to erase the memories that had tormented him for 27 years. "The night Thomas died," he began in a broken voice, "Victor wasn't in his room studying like he told us. I saw him leave the house around 8 und. I followed him because something about his attitude worried me. He'd been very strange those days, more aggressive, more resentful." My husband paused, looking at his hands as if the terrible truth he had kept for so long was written on them. "I saw them arguing by the ravine. Eleanor, I heard them screaming horrible things at each other. My world began to spin. What were they arguing about?" I whispered, even though part of me no longer wanted to know the answer. George looked up and I saw tears in his eyes, tears he hadn't even shed at our oldest son's funeral. "About the inheritance." "Eleanor, Victor was furious because Thomas was the oldest, because according to family traditions, he would inherit most of our assets. But there was something more, something about money that Thomas had found. What money? I asked, feeling the ground vanish beneath my feet. George sighed deeply before continuing. 3 days before he died, Thomas came to talk to me in the forge. He had discovered that Victor had been stealing money from the family savings account. Small amounts at first, but then larger sums. Thomas had proof. He'd been investigating for months. My mind refused to process what I was hearing. My youngest son, the one who had been so attentive after Thomas's death, the one who helped and cared for us, had been stealing from us since before his brother died. Why didn't you ever tell me? I accused George, feeling the betrayal multiply twofold, because when I got to the ravine that night, it was already too late, he replied in a choked voice. I saw Victor standing next to Thomas's body. Our youngest son was trembling, crying, and repeating over and over, "It was an accident. It was an accident." He looked at me with those desperate eyes and begged me to help him. "Dad," he said, "Thomas tripped when he was trying to hit me." I just defended myself and he lost his balance. Tears ran down my cheeks uncontrollably. "But you believed him," I murmured, even though I already knew the answer. George nodded slowly with an expression of guilt that had haunted him for decades. He was my son, Eleanor. My youngest son was asking for my help and Thomas was already dead. I couldn't bring one back to life by destroying the other. I thought it was really an accident, that Victor had learned his lesson, that he would become a better man after this. And the stolen money? I asked, needing to know every detail of this nightmare. And besides, who's gonna believe an old man of 67 who has been keeping this secret for 27 years? He was right. Do we just wait for him to kill us like he killed Thomas? "We're going to be very careful," George said, trying to sound more confident than he really was. "We are going to find a way to protect ourselves, to gather evidence to..." But his words were interrupted by the sound of the phone. It was Victor. "Hi, Mom," he said with that sweet voice that now sounded sinister to me. "Sophia and I were thinking, and we believe it would be beautiful to celebrate your 42nd wedding anniversary with something special. How about we take you to those hills you've always talked about next weekend? We could go on a family hike, take pictures, and have a perfect day together." My blood turned to ice. I looked at George, who had heard the conversation and had the same look of terror on his face. "That's a very sweet idea, son," I managed to reply in a trembling voice. "But let us think about it, and we'll get back to you tomorrow." After hanging up, George and I looked at each other in silence, knowing we had just received an invitation to our own execution. "The hills," I murmured. "He's going to take us to the hills to kill us and make it look like an accident." George nodded gravely, just like he did with Thomas at the ravine. That night we didn't sleep a minute, holding each other in our bed, planning how we could save ourselves from our own son. The next few days were a nightmare of terror and pretense. George and I had to act as if nothing had happened when Victor and Sophia came to visit, smiling when they talked about the hill trip, nodding when they excitedly told us they were going to spend time with family. But inside, every fiber of my being screamed with fear. I knew I was looking into the eyes of my oldest son's murderers, and that now they were planning to do the same to me and my husband. Sophia arrived on Wednesday afternoon, with a shopping bag in that radiant smile that now seemed like the grimace of a demon. "Eleanor, dear," she said, hugging me with those arms that would soon push me to my death. "I bought some supplies for our hill adventure. Sandwiches, juice, fruit, everything we'll need for the picnic." She showed me the contents of the bag as if she were an excited child. But I could only think about how each of those items could be used to cover up our murder. "I also brought my new camera," she added, pulling out an expensive digital camera. "I want to capture every moment of this special day. They're going to be photos we'll treasure forever." The irony of her words made me sick. The only photo she would take would be of our broken bodies at the bottom of some cliff if anyone ever found us. Victor appeared behind her carrying a new-looking hiking backpack. "Dad," he said to George with feigned enthusiasm, "I bought all the necessary equipment for a safe hike. Ropes, harnesses, lanterns, a first aid kit." Sophia appeared behind him, radiant as a bride on her wedding day. Except this was a wedding with death. During breakfast, which we could barely eat, Victor explained the route we would take in detail. "It's a beautiful trail," he said, spreading a map on the table. "It leads to a lookout where you can see the whole valley. They say the views are spectacular." His eyes shone with an enthusiasm that seemed demonic. Of course, the views would be spectacular. They would be the last we would see in our lives. "The trail has some steep parts," Sophia added as if giving us useful tourist information, "but nothing that experienced hikers like you can't handle." Her comment about our supposed hiking abilities sounded like a cruel joke. We were two 62-year-olds who barely walked through the park once in a while. As we loaded the car, I saw Victor meticulously checking his backpack, making sure he had everything he needed for his plan. I saw ropes, a small shovel, and something that looked like a flare gun. "What's that for?" I asked, pointing to the gun. "For safety," he replied without missing a beat. "If we get lost or something goes wrong, we can send a distress signal." Of course, they would send a distress signal after pushing us off a cliff, so our bodies could be found, and it would be confirmed that it was a tragic accident during a family hike. Everything was calculated. Every detail had been planned to make our murders look perfectly natural. The car ride to the hills lasted 2 hours that felt like an eternity. Sophia put on cheerful music and sang along with the songs, as if we were really going on a fun family outing. Victor drove carefully, obeying all the speed limits, stopping at every stop sign. He didn't want to risk an accident that would ruin his perfect plans. During the trip, George discreetly took my hand and activated the recording on his phone. Everything that happened from that moment on would be recorded. If we managed to survive, we would have proof. If not, at least the truth wouldn't die with us. When we finally arrived at the trailhead, my heart was pounding so hard I thought it would beat out of my chest. The place was beautiful with tall oaks and the sound of a nearby brook. But for me, it had become the setting for my own execution. Victor and Sophia took their backpacks out of the car, smiling and joking, as if it were the happiest day of their lives. "Ready for the adventure?" Victor asked, and for the first time in 27 years, I saw the same cold glint in his eyes that he'd had the night he killed his brother. The trail started out relatively easy, winding between lush trees and moss-covered rocks. Sophia walked ahead of us, constantly taking pictures and commenting on the beauty of the landscape. "Look at those wildflowers," she exclaimed, pointing toward bushes full of yellow blossoms. "And that beautiful bird." Her performance was perfect, that of a loving daughter-in-law enjoying a special day with her in-laws. Victor walked behind us, supposedly to make sure we didn't fall behind, but I could feel his eyes on our backs like daggers. Every time I turned to look at him, he smiled with that grin he had perfected over 27 years of lies. "How are you doing, Mom and Dad?" he would ask with fake concern. "Need to stop and rest?" After an hour of hiking, we began to climb a steeper part of the trail. My legs already felt heavy, and George was breathing with difficulty. We weren't used to this kind of exercise, and our murderous children knew it perfectly. They had chosen a route that would physically exhaust us, making us vulnerable for when the time came to execute their plan. "We're almost at the lookout," Sophia announced. Although, according to the map I had seen at home, we still had at least another hour of hiking, her lie confirmed that they had no intention of reaching the real lookout. The place where they planned to kill us must be much closer. During the hike, I tried to memorize every detail of the trail. every tree, every rock that could serve as a reference if I managed to survive and needed to explain to the police exactly where everything had happened. George was doing the same, and we occasionally exchanged glances loaded with terror and determination. We knew we were walking toward our deaths, but we also knew it was our only chance to get evidence against our murderers. "Oh, look at that!" Sophia suddenly shouted, pointing to a rock formation that loomed to our right. "That cliff has an incredible view. Why don't we climb up there to take some special photos?" My blood ran cold. There it was, the place they had chosen for our murder. The cliff rose about 95 feet above the main trail, accessible by a secondary path that seemed much more dangerous than the one we had been following. The rocks were loose. There were fewer trees to grab onto in case we stumbled, and from the top, you could see a precipice that fell into a deep ravine full of jagged rocks. "I don't know if that's a good idea," I said, trying to sound casual. "That trail looks pretty dangerous for people our age," but Victor had already started walking toward the turnoff, carrying his backpack full of safety equipment that I knew he wouldn't use to save us. "Come on, Mom," he said with that voice he used when he was a kid and wanted to convince me of something. "It'll only take a few minutes. Besides, Sophia's right. The photos from up there are going to be spectacular." The way he said spectacular made me tremble. They would be spectacular for whoever saw them afterward as evidence of our accident. George squeezed my hand discreetly, reminding me that his phone was recording everything. We had to go on. We had to go all the way to get the evidence we needed. If we refused now, they would simply find another opportunity, another place, another excuse to kill us. The climb to the cliff was exhausting. The loose rock slid under our feet, and more than once I was about to fall. But the most terrifying thing was realizing how perfect this place was for a murder. If someone accidentally tripped and fell from the top, there would be no way to survive. And most importantly, there would be no witnesses. "Almost there!" Sophia shouted from above, where she had already arrived with the agility of someone who had planned this route carefully. Victor followed her and then helped George and me complete the last few feet of the climb. His hands on my arms felt like the claws of a vulture. The lookout was indeed spectacular. From there you could see the whole valley, the hills in the distance, and the river winding through the trees. In any other circumstance, it would have been a beautiful moment to share with family. But knowing what I knew, the place seemed like the perfect setting for a nightmare. "Come over here for the photos," Sophia shouted, positioning herself near the edge of the cliff. "I want the valley to be in the background." George and I approached slowly, each step bringing us closer to our final destination. I could see Victor strategically positioning himself behind us, calculating angles, measuring distances. "Perfect," Sophia exclaimed, raising her camera. "Now hug each other and smile." George and I hugged, probably for the last time, while she took picture after picture. Every flash of the camera seemed like a lightning bolt announcing the storm that was about to come. "Take one more," Victor suggested, moving closer to us. "But this time, stand back a little so the landscape looks better." One step back meant being exactly on the edge of the precipice. George and I exchanged a look. The time had come. We moved back as we were told, feeling the solid ground disappear under our feet and only the emptiness of the abyss remaining behind us. Sophia raised the camera one more time, but this time I saw something different in her eyes. There was no longer any need to pretend. The mask had fallen. "Smile," she said in a voice that was no longer sweet at all. "This is going to be your last photo." At that moment, Victor lunged toward us with his arms outstretched. The plan was simple. Push us backward so we would fall into the void, take some photos of the accident, and then go down to discover our broken bodies. But George had been preparing for this moment. In the last second, he managed to grab Victor's wrist and pull him forward. "If we're going to die, you're coming with us," he shouted with a fury I had never seen in him before. For a moment, all four of us were teetering on the edge of the cliff, holding on to each other in a macabre dance between life and death. Sophia screamed and tried to help Victor, but the weight of all of us was too much. I felt the ground give way under my feet, felt gravity begin to win the battle. And then the four of us fell together, locked in a deadly embrace, screaming as the air whistled around us, and the rocky ground approached at breakneck speed. In those seconds that lasted an eternity, I thought of Thomas, of how he must have felt when Victor pushed him into the ravine 27 years ago. The impact was brutal. I heard the horrible sound of bones cracking, the sound of my own body shattering against the rocks. The pain was indescribable, but even more terrible was the taste of blood in my mouth and the certainty that this time Victor had won. This time there would be no witnesses to tell the truth. But then I heard George's voice, weak but clear. "Eleanor, don't move. Play dead." And I realized something incredible. I was still alive. The pain was so intense I thought I would go crazy. Every fiber of my body screamed in agony. I felt blood running down my face and something wet and sticky soaking my clothes. But George's voice echoed in my ears like a divine command play dead. With a willpower I didn't know I possessed, I remained completely still, controlling even my breathing so it would be imperceptible. A few feet away, I could hear the moans of pain from Victor and Sophia. They had also survived the fall, but from their groans, they seemed to be in worse condition than we were. "Sophia," I heard my son's broken voice. "Are you okay?" His concern for his wife made my stomach churn. This man, who had murdered his own brother and had tried to kill us, was still capable of feeling love for someone. "I think I broke my leg," Sophia moaned. "It hurts so much, Victor. And what about the old people?" The disrespectful way she referred to us confirmed what I already knew. We had never been family to her. We were just obstacles on her way to our money. I heard movement as if Victor were crawling toward us. My heart was beating so fast I was afraid he would hear it. "They're dead," he announced after a few minutes that felt like hours. "Both of them have their eyes open, but they're not breathing." His lie filled me with a strange hope. If he believed we were dead, maybe we would have a chance. "Perfect," Sophia whispered with a satisfaction that chilled my blood. "It worked just like we planned. Well, except for the part where we fell too." I heard her bitter laugh. "At least we won't have to pretend we love them anymore." For the next few minutes, that felt like an eternity, Victor and Sophia discussed their situation. Both were injured, but they could move. The plan now was to crawl until they found a place from which they could call for help and then tell the story of how they had miraculously survived a tragic accident that had killed their poor in-laws. "Remember the story," Victor said to Sophia. "We were taking pictures when a rock came loose under Dad's feet. He tripped and trying to grab on, he pulled Mom with him. We tried to help, but we fell too. It's important that our stories match." "I know," Sophia replied. "We've practiced this 100 times. We're the traumatized survivors of a family tragedy. Poor us. We lost our dear in-laws in a horrible accident." Her performance was so convincing that if I hadn't lived the truth, I would have believed every word. Gradually, their voices faded as they crawled toward what they hoped would be their salvation. When silence finally fell, George whispered my name so low I could barely hear it. "Eleanor, are you okay?" I answered in the same whisper, confirming that I was alive but terribly injured. "My left leg is broken," he told me in a voice choked with pain. "And I think I have a few fractured ribs. What about you?" I did a mental inventory of my body. I felt a stabbing pain in my right arm. My head throbbed as if someone were hitting it with a hammer. And there was definitely something wrong with my shoulder. But I was alive, and that was more than I had hoped for. "We're bad, but we're alive," I whispered. "The phone? It works, but there's no signal down here." That was the most terrifying part of our situation. We were alive, but trapped at the bottom of a ravine, injured. and with no way to communicate with the outside world. If no one came to look for us, we would die here slowly from thirst, hunger, or our wounds. George, I whispered, before it's too late, I need you to tell me everything. Everything that really happened the night Thomas died. My husband sighed deeply as if he had been waiting for this moment for 27 years. That night, he began in a trembling voice, Thomas came to find me in the forge. He was furious. He had papers in his hands, bank statements. He showed me evidence that Victor had been stealing money from our accounts for months. Small amounts at first, then larger sums. Thomas had been investigating because he had noticed discrepancies in our savings. The physical pain mingled with the emotional pain as I listened to the truth that had been hidden for decades. Thomas wanted to confront Victor. That same night, George continued. I tried to calm him down, to convince him to wait until the next day, but he was determined. He said he couldn't sleep knowing his younger brother was stealing from us. And you followed him? I asked, even though I already knew the answer. I followed him because I was afraid of what might happen. I knew Thomas's temper when he got angry, and I also knew well, I had noticed something strange about Victor lately. A coldness that sent shivers down my spine. When I got to the ravine, George continued, I found them screaming at each other. Thomas had the papers in his hand, waving them in Victor's face. You're a thief, he was yelling. You're stealing from our own parents. Victor denied everything. He said Thomas was crazy, that he was making things up. My heart raced as I imagined the scene. My two sons facing off in the dark, one accusing the other of betrayal. What happened next? George paused for a long time before continuing. Thomas told him that if he didn't return the money and confess everything to us, he would tell us the truth himself. Victor went berserk. He yelled that Thomas had always been the favorite, that he had always had everything easy, that it was time for things to change. And then George's voice broke. Victor pushed Thomas. It wasn't an accident. He pushed him with all his strength deliberately. I saw Thomas trying to keep his balance, saw his arms flailing desperately, looking for something to grab onto. But it was too late. Tears streamed down my cheeks, mixing with the blood from my wounds. Why did you never tell me the truth? George sighed deeply. Because when I got to where Victor was, he was crying, trembling, telling me over and over that it had been an accident, that he hadn't meant to do it. He begged me not to tell you anything, that he couldn't lose you too. But you knew it was a lie, I murmured from the bottom of my heart. Yes, but he was my son, Eleanor, my only surviving son. How could I turn him over to the police? How could I destroy what was left of our family? His justification hurt as much as my physical injuries. And the stolen money, I continued. Victor promised me he would return it little by little. He swore it had been a bad decision, that he had been desperate, that it would never happen again. But he never returned a single penny. In fact, he kept stealing, and I kept quiet because every day that passed made me more of an accomplice to his crime. Just then, we heard voices in the distance. Victor and Sophia had managed to find help. Soon, rescue teams would be here, and our murderous children would play the role of their lives, the traumatized survivors of a family tragedy. The voices got closer and closer, accompanied by the sound of helicopters flying over the area. The rescue team had arrived, and with them came the most crucial moment of our lives. George and I had to make a decision in a matter of minutes. Should we continue to pretend to be dead until we found the perfect opportunity to reveal the truth or risk being rescued along with our murderers? Eleanor, George whispered urgently. The phone recorded everything that happened up there. We have Sophia's confession about the plan. We have Victor admitting that we are obstacles. We have everything. But if they find us alive now, they can destroy the evidence before we manage to hand it over to the authorities. He was right. If Victor and Sophia realized that we had survived and heard their confessions, they would find a way to silence us forever. This time, it wouldn't be an accident. It would be something much more direct and definitive. We had to wait for the perfect moment. "They're down here," Victor's voice shouted from above. "My parents, please hurry." His performance was perfect, his voice broken with pain and despair. If I hadn't known the truth, I would have believed he was a son devastated by the loss of his parents. "Sir, stay calm," an authoritative voice replied, which must have belonged to the head of the rescue team. "We're going to come down to evaluate you. You and your wife can move." I heard the sound of ropes and equipment, being prepared for the descent. Sophia had perfected her role as the grieving widow. "I can't believe this happened," she sobbed. "We were taking pictures so happy. It all happened so fast. A rock came loose and they fell. Every word was a stab in my heart because I knew she would repeat those same words to the police, to the media, to anyone who wanted to hear her version of events." The rescuers began to descend. I could hear their voices getting closer, the sound of their boots against the rock, the clinking of their equipment. George discreetly squeezed my hand, reminding me that we had to keep up the act no matter what happened. "They're here," one of the rescuers shouted upon finding us. "We have 2 people at the bottom of the ravine." He approached us and began to examine us. I kept my eyes closed and my breathing so shallow it was almost imperceptible. I felt his hands looking for a pulse on my neck, his ear close to my mouth trying to detect breathing. "This one still has a faint pulse," he announced, referring to George. "The woman? I'm not sure. I need the medical team down here immediately." My heart raced. The plan was working. They would believe that George was on the verge of death but still alive, while I would be close enough to death to not be an immediate threat. For the next few minutes, which felt like hours, the paramedics worked on us. I felt them put an oxygen mask on me, check my wounds, and secure me to a stretcher. The whole time, I had to fight against every instinct in my body that screamed at me to open my eyes, to ask for help, to stop pretending. "The man is stable but critical," I heard one of the paramedics report over the radio. "The woman is in very serious condition. Pulse is almost imperceptible. We need to transport them to the hospital." Immediately, perfect. They would take us to the hospital where we would have the opportunity to talk to the authorities without Victor and Sophia being able to silence us. During the ascent on the stretchers, I could hear Sophia's feigned sobs and the words of comfort that the rescuers offered her and Victor. "You were so brave to survive this," someone said to her. "It's a miracle that you're relatively okay." If only they knew that. The real miracle was that George and I were alive to tell the truth. In the medical helicopter, as we flew toward the hospital, I could feel George's presence on the stretcher next to mine. The paramedics were focused on keeping him stable, and from their conversations, I understood that he was in critical condition. His injuries were more serious than mine, and for a terrible moment, I feared he might die before we had the chance to reveal the truth. "Mom," I heard one of the paramedics say to me, "if you can hear me, hold on. We'll be at the hospital in a few minutes." Everything was exactly as we had left it on the day of our family outing. The breakfast dishes were still in the sink. The bed was unmade. The flowers Victor had brought me that week were still on the kitchen table, now withered and dead. It was as if time had stopped at the moment our normal lives ended forever. "Do you think we'll ever be happy again?" I asked George that first night back as we lay in our familiar bed. He hugged me with his uninjured arm and sighed deeply. "I don't know, Eleanor," he said, "but we're alive. We have the truth on our side, and for the first time in 27 years, we don't have to live with secrets." The trial began 6 months later. On the day I had to testify, I looked Victor directly in the eyes for the first time since the arrest. I saw no remorse, no pain. I didn't see the son I had raised. I saw a cold and calculating stranger who had disguised himself as my son for decades. When I finished my testimony, after recounting every horrible detail of our experience, I addressed him directly from the witness stand. "Victor, I don't know who you are, but you are no longer my son. My son died the night you killed Thomas, and what has been living in his place for 27 years is a monster that I unwittingly helped raise." The jury deliberated for 3 days before finding Victor guilty of first-degree murder for Thomas's death and first-degree attempted murder for what he did to us. Sophia received the same conviction as an accomplice. Both were sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Now, 1 year later, George and I have begun the process of formally adopting our grandchildren. They are beautiful and innocent children ages 7 and 9, who deserve a chance to grow up knowing what true love is, not the manipulative and toxic love they receive from their biological parents. Every night when I tuck them in, I tell them about their Uncle Thomas, the brother they never knew. I tell them about his kindness, his honesty, his dream of building beautiful homes for families to be happy in. I tell them that he would have loved them, protected them, and taught them to be good people. Our cottage is filled with their laughter again. George has returned to the forge, creating small iron animals for them to play with. I teach part-time at the school, coming home to their hugs and drawings. The scars of betrayal will never fully fade. But the truth has healed us in ways I never thought possible. Family isn't about blood. It's about trust, love, and honesty. And now, for the first time in decades, we have all three. If this story gripped you from beginning to end, if it made you question everything you thought you knew about the people closest to you, then hit that like button, share your thoughts in the comments below, and subscribe right now for more twisted, real-life tales of betrayal, survival, and justice. Turn on notifications so you won't want to miss what's coming next.